Well, thank you so much for being here. It's a real pleasure to have you all be present at this panel that we've put together. This is a joint panel between Respectability and Faith Inclusion Network. Ooh, that sounds really nice. Um, and our panel is on theology and disability, and kind of the hope and goal is to bring folks from a range of traditions together to talk about our shared experience with disability and theology. Um, so, are we doing okay sound-wise? Okay. First, I'll just kind of read a little bit about our panelists, a little bio introduction, we'll give a visual description, and then we'll hop into the conversation together, which I'm really looking forward to. My name is Ben Bond. I am a Faith Inclusion and Belonging Associate at Respectability, which I'll talk about with Shelly a little bit in a sec. I am ordained in the Christian Church Disciples of Christ, along with Tom, which is a mainline progressive Christian denomination in the United States and Canada. I'm a queer, multiply disabled person with lived experience both growing up with a disability and acquiring one later in life. Faith, inclusion, and disability have been at the center of my work for many years. I founded and co-chaired Yale Divinity School's first disability student organization named Divine Abilities, which was dedicated to centering disability issues at an institutional level, as well as providing a space for students to explore interpersonally the relationships between disability and faith communities. Our other presenter, who should be on his way, is based out of Dallas. His name is Imam Nadim Bashir. He has been a religious leader in North Texas for over 10 years. He's a graduate of the prestigious religious seminary in the United Kingdom and is pursuing further education in Islamic divinity and chaplaincy. While serving in the community, Imam Nadim recognized that Muslim disabled special needs families were struggling to feel included and to find support. He has dedicated himself to building awareness of disabilities and helping families in the Muslim community get connected with resources and education through his group DREAM. DREAM stands for Disability Resource Education and Awareness for Muslims. Imam Nadim strives to build more inclusion for individuals with special needs in the Muslim community and the greater community as a whole through different coalitions and initiatives. And to the right, in person with me, is Shelly Christensen, the one and only, also my boss, wonderfully. She is the Senior Director of Faith and Inclusion and Belonging at Respectability, a diverse disability-led nonprofit that works to create systemic change in how society views and values people with disabilities. Come talk to us after the panel if you want to learn more about our work. Shelly, who is neurodivergent, is a pioneer and leader in the faith community and disability and mental health inclusion movement. Her passion for this work is anchored by her experience as a parent of a child with autism, and Shelly is the author of this wonderful book called From Longing to Belonging, a practical guide to including people with disabilities and mental health conditions in your faith community, which is being sold in the narthex. Shelly is the co-founder of Jewish Disability Awareness, Acceptance, and Inclusion Month, held annually in February around the globe. In 2019, Shelly was awarded the prestigious Reimagining Spirituality Leadership Award from the Religion and Spirituality Interest Network of the American Association of Developmental Disabilities, pardon my dyslexia, AAIDD, in recognition of her inspiring leadership, innovation, and outstanding contributions in the field of disability and mental health inclusion. Sorry for going fast there for our interpreter. To the right of me here, has taught in special education in Midland Independent School District in Midland, Texas for 25 years. In 2005, Tom started SHARE, a respite care ministry for families of children with disability at First Christian Church Midland, which became a nonprofit in 2015. Tom was ordained in the Christian Church Disciples of Christ, same denomination as I am, and SHARE was the ministry Tom was called to serve. He served as SHARE's executive director to help SHARE develop parent, sibling, and family support and respite programs in Midland and Odessa, Texas, until his retirement in 2020. But he couldn't stop working. Tom discovered the Faith Inclusion Network, FIN, and wanted to start an affiliate in West Texas. He became connected with others in Texas and helped start the Texas Faith and Disability Network. After serving on FIN's board, Tom became the executive director of Faith Inclusion Network in July 2022. Okay, sure. Ready now? Okay, cool. Thank you so much. After serving in FIN's, became the executive director, and Tom serves on the board of the newly formed Disability Ministry Network of Texas. Y'all should check that out as if you are Texans. And through FIN, Tom is assisting with the Institute of Theology and Disability as its fiscal agent. And we have on screen with us Harshada Rajani, hailing from Charlotte, North Carolina. Harshada is a freelance writer and the co-founder of We Win, a nonprofit dedicated to helping people recover from neurological injuries, afford rehabilitation. Though she graduated from Duke University, Phi Beta Kappa, and summa cum laude in 2007, and began her medical school at her alma mater immediately thereafter, a massive stroke at 23 changed all of her plans. The stroke left her with locked-in syndrome. She was paralyzed bilaterally from head to toe and unable to speak but cognitively intact. She says, though she has made progress since then, her life is still a struggle. As she fights to regain her voice and her muscles, she's found an even more powerful voice through her writing. Her writing has made its way onto Huffington Post, Refinery 29, Vice, and other publications. Through her work with We Win, she helps patients and families navigate these tough times while also spreading awareness to the larger community about disability, healthcare costs, and the importance of physical therapy. She's also started speaking engagements to share her experience and educate medical professionals and advocate for patients. Harshada is also an advocate of the South Asian Desi community and has grown up in Hindu tradition. And lastly, we have the miraculous Darla Schumm, who received her BA in Interdisciplinary Studies with concentrations in History, Psychology, and Women's Studies from Goshen College, her MA in Social Ethics from Pacific School of Religion, and a PhD in Religion and Ethics from Vanderbilt. Dr. Schumm's current research focuses on intersections between religious studies and disability studies. She's the co-editor of Disability and World Religions, Introduction, which is an incredible textbook if you get a chance to read it. A textbook on world religions and disability. She has published several articles in this area, and she enjoys traveling, knitting, reading fiction, and playing with her son in her free time. Thank you for listening to everyone's bios. And one really wonderful thing to point out is everyone on this panel has a disability or has direct lived experience with disability. So on that note, I will just briefly give myself a visual description. I'm a white male presenting person. I use he, they pronouns. I've got brown hair, white skin, brown glasses, and a brown beard. And I'm wearing purple button-down shirt and green pants. And if you hear my voice, feel free to stop me and say hi around the conference. And I can pass it to Shelly, Tom, and our panelists to give a brief visual description. Hello, hello. Here, you can use mine real quick.
Hi, everyone. Shelly Christensen. I've already done this today, but I'm going to do it again. I'm a white female with curly brown hair. I have brown eyes. I'm wearing purple glasses, and I have on kind of a multicolored pastel sundress. And yes, that's me.
I'm Tom Jones. I'm a white male with white hair, glasses. I'm wearing a blue shirt and gray pants, and that's about it.
And we can pass it to our panelists online.
Harshada, Rajani. I'm an Indian female with straight black hair and brown eyes, and you can just see my face.
Good afternoon. The robot voice you hear is my screen reader. I'm Darla. I'm a white female with brown hair, brown eyes. Ben and I color coordinated today. I am also wearing a purple shirt, large silver hoop earrings, and a silver infinity knot necklace.
Yellow mic, perfect. All right, thank you all for your visual descriptions, and now we can get to the meat of our conversation. Or as a vegetarian, I say the tofu of our conversation. Yeah, so this is a really great opportunity for all of us from different traditions to have this conversation around disability theology and our belief systems. And so my first question, I want everyone to, apologies, before we get to the questions, I want to offer an opportunity for each person speaking on the tradition they're representing to give a short overview of their tradition and its relation to disability and theology. Considering that we are all only experts in our own experiences, this will give us an opportunity to learn from one another in ways that we may not be aware. So I can pass it to Shelly first, if that works for you, Shelly.
Sure. It's not going to work, is it? Let's see. No? Okay. So much for that. I am a Jew. And while there are prohibitions, they're interpreted as prohibitions in the Torah, reflecting men who have some kind of blemishing condition called a mum, or some kind of physical manifestation, which we would call disability. That really isn't, in my mind, relevant to this conversation. That was referring to priests back in the ancient days. We are living, last time I checked, in 2023. And so to bring some of the text from the Hebrew Bible that really form the foundation for much of the thought, leadership, the activities, the programming, and so forth happening in the Jewish community. I wanted to cite just a few of those. These are all my favorites. They're like having children. You have to tell each one they're your favorite. But first, of course, is Genesis 1:27. And God created humankind in the divine image, creating it in the image of God. That is so important to remember. And to that, I'd like to say this. When you look into a person's eyes and you see the spark of the divine there, you won't wonder how to treat them. You'll know. It's a very powerful statement. We know that Moses told God, when God said, "You're going to lead the people out of Egypt," and Moses said, "Oh, no, I've never been a man of words, either in times past or now that you've spoken to your servant. I am slow of speech and slow of tongue." And now I'm going to paraphrase what God said. Moses, does that matter? Doesn't matter to me. You are the person with the talents, the gifts, the strengths, the wherewithal, the vulnerability to be able to lead these stiff-necked people from slavery to freedom. In Leviticus 19, chapter 14, you shall not insult the deaf or place a stumbling block before the blind. You shall fear your God. I am Adonai. That kind of speaks to, maybe it can be interpreted as just talking about blind people or deaf people. But honestly, this is about all people. Just don't create those obstacles for anyone. In Numbers 12, Miriam and Aaron spoke out about Moses' wife, and it did not sit well with God. And Miriam was afflicted with something akin to leprosy. But what's really important, she had to leave the camp. That was the commandment. She had to leave the camp. But the interesting and most important thing is that the community waited for her. The 600,000 other Israelites and related travelers waited for Miriam for a week until she came so that they could journey together. Again, speaking to the power of community. And Deuteronomy. This is my favorite, chapter 29, where everyone is gathered to conclude the covenant with God. And the text says your elders, your officials, every householder in Israel, your children, your wives, even the stranger within your camp, from woodchopper to water drawer, to enter into the covenant of your God, which your God is concluding with you this day with its sanctions. It's an image of inclusion. But even further, in order to establish you this day as God's people, and in order to be your God as promised you and sworn to your fathers, I make this covenant with its sanctions, not with you alone, but both with those who are standing here with this day before our God and those who are not here with us today. We can be interpreted many different ways, but the way that I see it and a lot of people see it is this is what a community is, that everyone has value, everyone belongs, everyone is part of that.
I speak from the Christian tradition. I'm a Christian. Going back to the Hebrew Bible, I think one of the things Shelly mentioned that really impacts the theology of disability is being we're created in God's image. And while that's a simple concept that we don't really look into, but when you think about somebody with a disability, how that really impacts who they are, and who they are is the most important thing there. Another thing, too, in the Hebrew Bible, I think the emphasis on community. Shelly's brought that out in some of her books, that it's important to be included in the community. You can't move on without including everybody. And the other thing, too, that we look at is that God works through people with limitations. Moses, of course, had the disability, and you think of all the people that God called, and they're not you wouldn't necessarily hire them for that position for jobs in our community. They're people that were not they didn't have the best qualities, but God called them anyway and worked through them. And I think that's another important thing when it comes to disability and theology. In the New Testament, as a person with a disability, I started reading the Gospels in college, and one of the things that just struck me was how inclusive Jesus was in his ministry, and how he came for people with disabilities like myself. And that was just really transforming, life-changing for me. But obviously, the inclusion of Jesus' ministry is something that just stood out to me. And also in my readings, knowing how Paul had dealt with his disability or limitation, and how Jesus, and some authors now consider Jesus as being a little disabled as well. And that's kind of a comforting thing, because he's fully human, just like I am, and so those are some things that I think really impact the way that we look at disability and faith inclusion in our world today. And I would just kind of say that the church, Christianity, has probably followed the way society looks at disability. And from exclusion. I know Eric had the little graph, if you remember, what happened in the 50s, 60s, 70s, there's very little. And today, it's just skyrocketed. I've lived through all of that, and I'll tell you, there are a lot of great things happening today. Voices of people with disabilities are being heard. There's still a lot to do, but there's a lot going on, and it didn't used to be that way. And so we do have it's a lot more inclusive Christianity is now, I think, when it comes to disability. I think there's a willingness, people want to, and they just don't know how. And there are a lot of organizations that can provide that how nowadays. So, I can see how it's changed. It's refreshing to me to hear so many voices today and to see so many expressions in different faiths, as we'll find out, that are working to meet the needs of people with special needs and disabilities and their families. I think the inclusion work, which will lead into the belonging that we all hope for, is the inclusion work is what we have in front of us today.
Thank you so much. I'm going to hand it off to our Zoom participants as well to talk about the traditions they're representing. And yeah.
I'm Harshada, and I'm Hindu. Though I have a complicated relationship with Hinduism, or religion in general, which often happens with an acquired disability. So in Hinduism, there are two major concepts: karma, which I'm sure you've heard of, and dharma. Karma means deed, and dharma means duty. Karma is the concept that your current state is a product of all your previous actions and choices, whether in this life or a previous life. And so for disability, your current disability is a result of your past. And dharma, duty, it's the duty of all non-disabled people to take care or support people with disability, because we believe that we are all in this together, even though we believe that a person is disabled because of their karma. It's still the duty of the non-disabled person to be there for the person with whatever difficulty, because we are one.
I want to clarify before I launch into a brief discussion or overview of Buddhism that I am actually maybe the only person on this panel who is not a practitioner of the tradition that I'm speaking about. I am not Buddhist per se. I came to Buddhism through the academic world and I teach it. But I have certainly incorporated many Buddhist principles and concepts into my own life. Buddhism is to Hinduism as Christianity is to Judaism, in the sense that Buddhism grows out of a Hindu context. But it is, and it shares many of the same ideas and concepts, such as karma and dharma, and I will not reiterate those. Harshada has introduced them beautifully to us. Buddhism is grounded in the teachings of the Buddha, and the first sermon or teaching that the Buddha gave was the Four Noble Truths. All of Buddhism, regardless of the different manifestations and branches of Buddhism, grow out of these Four Noble Truths, which very quickly are that the first noble truth is that suffering exists in the world. The second noble truth is that the cause of suffering is our human inability to understand the true nature of reality. And the true nature of reality is that there is nothing permanent, that the reality is constant impermanence. The third noble truth is that there is a cure or a path to the cessation of suffering. And the fourth noble truth is the eightfold path, which is the path for the cessation of suffering. And I won't go through all of the components of the eightfold path. You can email me later if you're interested in those. The goal of Buddhism, and it's a bit of an oxymoron to talk about a goal of Buddhism. I'll explain that a little more later when we get to some of the questions, but Buddhists strive towards enlightenment. Buddhism is a non-theistic religion. So unlike its monotheistic counterparts, there is no concept of an ultimate divine being in Buddhism. So there are those who have debated if Buddhism should be categorized as a religion. Some argue it's more of a psychology, some argue it's more of a philosophy. But it's a practice. And as a practice, Buddhists strive towards this understanding of enlightenment, which is freedom from the world that we currently live in. The Sanskrit term for that is samsara, the world of samsara. And the way that Buddhists ultimately achieve enlightenment is through the process of reincarnation, which is a little bit like the concept of karma. I'm sure you've probably heard of it in some context. Reincarnation, of course, is the belief that one is born and reborn. So birth, death, and rebirth, which is the cycle of samsara. And once you break out of or escape the cycle of reincarnation, you will reach enlightenment, which is complete understanding of the true nature of reality. Different schools or branches of Buddhism believe that different things happen at the point of enlightenment. Some teach that that's the end of existence, that the soul, which doesn't really exist in Buddhism, is reabsorbed into the larger cosmos. For now, I'll just quickly say that I think one of the really lovely aspects of Buddhism as it relates to this concept of enlightenment is that there's no dogma in Buddhism. There's not one path to enlightenment. There are many, many different paths. There are many, many sacred texts, or what Buddhism refers to as sutras, teachings that aid one on the journey towards enlightenment, but there's not a prescription about how to do it. So what works for me may not work for someone else, and that's okay, which I think really opens up some nice ways of thinking about the ways bodies and minds function differently and arrive at the same place, but in different ways.
Fine. Thank you so much, Darla and Harshada. Just a quick interlude. Our Imam was unable to make it. I think potentially it's an emergency. So very kindly, as you'll remember from the panel prior to lunch, we have very kindly received an opportunity to hear from one of our speakers who can introduce themselves and share that. I'll pass it to you, Shelly.
Thank you, Zainab.
Thank you all so much. My name is Zainab. I am not an imam, and I do not have like a religious background, but I am a practicing Muslim. So I will try my best to kind of explain the faith tradition in terms of explaining the faith and I guess how it connects to disabilities. So in Islam, as Muslims, what we do is we follow the teachings of our Prophet Muhammad Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So every single time I say his name, I send like a blessing upon him. That's just the way that it is. Every Muslim you meet will do that. So they'll probably say peace be upon him or something like that. But I use the Arabic. But essentially within our religion, what we're asked to do is we are asked to be the best possible versions of ourselves, and we're asked to serve our communities. And really what that looks like is we're asked to not think about our own needs, but we're asked to think about the needs of our neighbors. We're asked to think about how we can use the resources that we have, or use the luxuries or the items that we've been gifted through God to help others, and how we can make sure that our time is being used to help serve others, and also just being mindful of the impact that we have. So in Islam, the concept that we have for individuals with disabilities is we consider them the inhabitants of Jannah. For those of you that were here earlier, you guys heard me say that. And it's this idea that these are individuals that have been guaranteed heaven. Like regardless of anything, they are inhabitants of heaven. And if we want to become closer to God, it is our duty to serve them. It is our duty to help them. And it's our duty to not only help individuals with disabilities, but all individuals that are struggling. Social justice and equality are a really, really big part of the religion. And so we're asked to step up in any way that we can. We're asked to become a little uncomfortable if we have to, but we're asked to serve. The best way that I can kind of describe it to you is that in Islam, not only do our actions matter, but the intentions within itself matters. And the intention of your action makes the biggest difference in why you're doing it. Like you can definitely help someone pick up something that they dropped on the floor, but are you doing it because others are watching, or are you doing it because you truly believe that this person needs help? And it's that idea that drives like people's actions within the religion is, why am I doing this? I'm doing this for God's pleasure. God has asked me to take care of others, to take care of my community, to serve my community. And that's, I mean, I think that's the best way I can kind of explain it without going directly into the scripture.
Well, on that note, I think that's a really great transition to one of the questions we were having. What is one value, text, or teaching from the tradition you represent that informs the tradition's belief about disability? Give you a chance to think about that. Take about 10 minutes on this question, then we'll open it up for Q&A for folks. So if you have questions for us, feel free to write those down and we'll get a mic to you. And also, right before we start, I'll just say this panel will continue tomorrow, and it'll be about practices and implementation of the theological beliefs that folks have in the tradition. So if you want to see the second half, feel free to join us tomorrow around the same time, I believe. But on that note, I'll pass it to anyone on the panel. Let's have the folks on Zoom go first, just because it's a little easier to give them a chance that way.
So one of the most read in the scriptures is the Vedas, and the philosophical part of the Vedas is called the Upanishads.
Okay, I'll know that one.
And in it says that the body is separate from the consciousness. It makes that disparity very clear and emphasizes that the body is constantly changing and that you are not your body. And that's a phrase that actually really helped me during my recovery. Like, yes, my whole body was a mess, but my mind and my soul were still intact. And I found that to be really powerful, because when you look at the karma on its base value, cosmic justice, it makes a lot of sense. But then when you think about it in terms of bad things happening to good people, it kind of falls apart. And like, you think, did I do something to deserve this stroke? What could I have done? And there's so much guilt with that. So looking at this aspect of the whole, you are not your body, I think that was really powerful for me.
Okay, I'll know that one.
Thank you. So I had a really hard time picking just one or two concepts to talk about. So I am very excited that the conversation continues tomorrow and we can keep talking. I guess what I would say about Buddhism, and again, it's as I said, Buddhism grows out of Hinduism. So you're going to hear some echoes, again, from the Hindu context. But this notion of the true nature of reality being that the world is impermanent. And Buddhism goes on then to say that, and this is really the second noble truth, fleshed out a little more, but Buddhism goes on to say that the reason that we suffer, humans suffer at any level, great or small suffering, is because we don't get it, that the world is impermanent and we are attached to permanence. And so I do this exercise, we don't have time to do it today, but with my students where I say, okay, think about times in your life when you've suffered. It could be something really major, really minor, or in between. And if you really start to think about those moments of suffering and what was it that was kind of causing the suffering, more often than not, it's because something has changed or you were attached to a particular outcome or something, a way of being in the world that didn't pan out the way you had hoped. And the actual experience is not, again, Buddhism would argue, is not the suffering. The suffering is the fact that you were attached to it being a particular way. So super quick, silly example. My son just turned 16 2 days ago, and there's a part of me that is freaking out because my baby is growing up and in a wonderful way, becoming more and more independent and self-sufficient and getting ready to live his own life. And that causes me some sadness because he's gonna leave home. I mean, I know there are probably parents thinking, you hope, and I do hope, but what is hard for me is that I am attached to the way things are now, because the way things are now bring me great joy. I live with my child and he's fun and I enjoy having him around. And I know that as he gets older, he needs me less, he'll be around less. And again, Buddhism would say, it's not that my kid is growing up and getting older that causes me to suffer. It is my attachment to having him with me at all times or living with me that causes me to suffer. And if I could just realize that the nature of reality is that things change. Children age and grow up and move out and live on their own and live their own lives. And I need to train myself and my mind to be at peace, not only be at peace with that, but to celebrate that. So this concept of impermanence, that the world is impermanent, and the focus in Buddhism on freedom from attachment, I think can be very helpful, particularly as folks grapple with what it means, again, to have minds and bodies that don't always function, operate the way we maybe want them to, or think they should. And there's much more to say, but I'll give my colleagues a chance to chime in.
Thank you, Darla. I always like to say, as helpful disability framework, that all ability is temporary to that Buddhist kind of impermanence. Therefore, we all have a vested interest in working towards disability justice. So thank you for sharing that perspective. I'm going to pass it along to our panelists in person. Shelly has already shared some great textual examples, so I'm sure we can pass it along down the line here.
I want to add, many congregations have a sign in front or on their website that says, "My house shall be called a house of prayer for all peoples." And I started thinking about that and wondered what it really meant. And I thought, it's aspirational. So I wanted to find some text that really explained the why we must be, in whatever spiritual context, whether it's literal or whether it's, just a magnification of an idea, why there must be, we are a house of prayer for all peoples. And actually, that's from Isaiah chapter 56, verse 7, but it's the end of the verse. And the beginning of the verse is, I will bring them to my sacred mount and let them rejoice in my house of prayer. Their burnt offerings and sacrifices shall be welcome upon my altar, for my house shall be called a house of prayer for all peoples. It really provides the why belonging is where, as communities, we have to think differently. And so there's something about thinking differently, doing differently, acting differently. We'll talk about that tomorrow. There was a great Hasidic master. His name was HaYehudi HaKadosh. The Holy Jew is the English translation. And he lived in the early 1800s. And he wrote this. And it's a guiding principle. It's been in my work. I share it wherever I go. And he said, good intentions alone, not followed by action, are without value. For it is the actions which make the intentions so profound.
I just wanted to kind of follow up a little bit on the why question. Something I think all of us have asked at one time or another. One of the things that has meant a lot to me is the scripture in John where they're walking and the disciples ask, why is this man, who sinned to cause this man to be blind? And Jesus just really avoided that question, didn't answer that question, but said neither his parents sinned, but he's created so God's glory can be known in him. And that to me has been life-affirming, and it sidesteps that why question, but maybe that why question is not as important as who we are, and that's the most important question there. And so that has always given me inspiration to continue and to in faith life and respond to God's call because of the potential and that each person has, no matter what the disability is. It looks past the disability, and as Shelly said, you see the spark in the person's eye, and that is just, to me, extremely important. One other thing, as a person with growing up with a disability, the healings were kind of problematic. A lot of the disability, for the most part, is lifetime disability that we live with. And, I think in our society, we're all, in the glamour and everything, we're all ready for a cure. But part of those healings was not just the cure of the disability, it was the restoration back into the community. And in that sense, that's the inclusion piece that we're involved in. As she said this morning, the people with disabilities and families, when they get together, they just really enjoy that because you know that you're with people who get it. And in that sense, I think community really is healing. And this is something I think that people with disabilities, family members, caregivers, we all need that community and that restoration to be whole, and those relationships that make our lives whole. And that comes through inclusion. It comes through relationships, and absence in our faith communities doesn't do us any good. It's being included and being a part of a faith family and a part of a community of people that understand and appreciate us for who we are, and not for what we can do or what we can offer, but genuinely appreciate us for who we are.
Thank you. I completely agree. I think that's really, really well said. I guess the way in which I would kind of describe it in an Islamic context, the first thing I'm going to do is actually going to be, I'm going to play a verse for you guys of the Quran, and then I'm going to explain exactly what it says. I would do it myself, but my Arabic is atrocious, and I'd rather you guys hear how beautiful the Arabic it is on its own. So.
ولا نساء من نساء عسى أن يكن خيرا منهن ولا تلمزوا أنفسكم ولا تنابزوا بالألقاب بئس الاسم الفسوق بعد الإيمان ومن لم يتب فأولئك هم الظالمون.
So that was a verse from the 49th chapter of the Quran, verse number 11. And essentially, if I was going to translate that verse, what I would tell you guys is that it says, "Oh, those of you who believe, do not ridicule others for the way that they speak, for the way that they act, for the way that they look. Do not ridicule men, do not ridicule women, do not ridicule individuals. The only thing that you should be concerned about is whether or not someone believes in God." And the idea is that no matter who an individual is, no matter what faith tradition that they are, no matter what disability that they have, your job is to respect them, speak good of them, that they are your community. And the second part is actually that I'm going to share with you guys is actually from a hadith, but I'm going to do a little activity because the way that I usually do this with the kids that I work with is I ask everyone to go ahead and raise one hand if you're able. I just want you to go ahead and put one hand out, like right in front of your face. And I want you to try to connect your pinky and your thumb. I want you to hold that, right? That feels comfortable, that feels okay. Now I want you to go ahead and close your hand, put it into a fist if you're able. And then I want you to try to stick up your ring finger, but only your ring finger. Like I want you to try to stick it up, right? Like we're kind of struggling, it's kind of difficult. Or now I want you to go ahead and close your fingers together. Now I want you to try to hold up your middle finger and your ring finger, but not the rest. Do you guys feel like a little discomfort or a little pain in your hands and it feels kind of weird? So the way that I always talk about this next part is using this context. So in Islam, there is this hadith, I won't be able to quote it properly, but essentially it's from the book of Bukhari and Sahih Muslim, which are two religious scriptures that have hadiths. And it says that the believers are like one body, and if one part of the body is afflicted with pain or fever, the entire body is restless. And what that means is if one part of your community is hurting, if one member of your community is not doing okay, you as a community need to step up, and you as a community are supposed to be uncomfortable. You as a community need to work together and alleviate that discomfort, because this is your body, this is your community, right? And for me, I guess that's one of the most powerful things. Whenever I am working with disability, I'm reminded of that idea that like these aren't others, right? This is my community. Like these are my brothers, these are my sisters. And the same way in which if I knew I had a fever, I would go to the doctor. If I knew I had a fever, I'd get medicine. It is my job to act that way for these community members of mine. And that's something I guess really informs my faith tradition and also helps motivate me in the work that I do.
Thank you so much. I always love hearing recitation of the Quran. It always just feeds my soul. Well, we've got about 8 minutes left, roughly, or 7 minutes left. If anyone has like a burning question that this panel was a very cool, rare panel to have that you'd like someone to talk about, we have a chance for probably about one question. Okay, let's pass that on. Got a tech guy coming with a mic. Thank you so much.
Okay, so my question is kind of from your different faith perspectives. The idea of maybe spinning things, I feel really gifted by the experiences I've had with my disability. I had seizures for 35 years and have had a lot of impermanence, and gave me a chance to accept a lot of things. And Ram Dass talks about being stroked by grace and his experiences with spiritual transformation after his stroke. Kind of furthering that, kind of from the perspective of karma, maybe we all got a gift that other people can't see. And that's opportunity to let go of our attachment to permanence. And maybe it's our job to serve in that way of helping people with more typicality, with being able to know how to handle it when they have their experience of disability. And that is, maybe we all have more kind of transformative experiences that if we are in a place of service in our faith communities, other people can see that opportunity for connection with divinity or spirit or Christ consciousness or Buddha consciousness or whatever, if they know that that is a possibility and an expectation. And I'm just kind of wondering from that perspective of what if karma is advanced class and not something bad? Because all faith traditions seem to kind of come at it from that perspective originally, and how do we transform that?
Just want to confirm that question was, what if karma is an advanced class? Is that what you said?
Right. What if
Okay.
what if we all have a gift instead of an impediment?
Sure. I'll let our karmic tradition folks on the screen answer that first, if you have any reflections.
I think it takes a lot of personal growth and maturity to see karma like that. And I think, yeah, that is how we should see it. We should see it as I did something good in my past, and now this is a gift that I'm being given. I'm able to talk to people all over the country and write and do all these amazing things. I wouldn't have had the opportunity to do in my pre-stroke life. So I think it's really a great thing to look to karma in that way. But I think it's our own mindset that holds us back from just seeing all the obstacles and all the gray and kind of seeing past that to look at the big picture. So yeah, I think karma should be seen as a good thing.
I would just add that the Buddha taught that karma is not something we have, it's something we do. So karma in Buddhism translates to action. Translates as action. It's a verb. And in that sense, yeah, it's about how we act, what we do, how we treat others. And again, the theory goes that you advance from one lifetime to the next based on your karma or your actions. And there's a lot of philosophical debate about what that means, but I like thinking, kind of whittling it down to that idea of action and how we are in the world, and how we treat one another.
Well, on that note, I think this has been a conclusion to a wonderful panel. Thank you for attending. Thank you to our panelists and our guest panelists that we didn't know was coming. You did a wonderful job. And I would, if I had it memorized, I'd read A Guest House by Rumi. I feel like there's a lot of really deep conversation about welcoming those experiences as a gift. Look that up if in your spare time if you want. And thank you for coming, and we'll be doing another conversation tomorrow in the other workshop. So, and that's it. Thank you so much.